Hello everybody, Weegee here. Let's talk about Ice Queendom Episode 5, Awake in a Dream. Episode 5 starts out with RWBY getting pulled out of the nightmare by Xion, before Nightmare Weiss can get to her. And we get more information on how the Grimm built the dream world. It used Weiss's thoughts to construct the fortress, with the Grimm being at the core of this fortress and her mind. This isn't really too far off of what I was trying to say, though I was thinking more of her heart than her mind. But the mind and heart aren't too far apart when you're talking about emotions and the like. This might also support the idea of Weiss's grandfather being a core part of her mind, but more on that later. Between these scenes, we see the Grimm wrapping itself more firmly around Weiss's mind, using her father's twisted sense of what it means to be a Schnee, and Weiss's desire to be the perfect Schnee. After this, RWBY gives them all the information that she was able to gather in the dream world, and they dub other Weiss Negative Weiss, kind of like Nega Scott in Scott Pilgrim. Honestly, this is a missed opportunity. They should have called her Ice Queen Weiss, giving the nickname she acquires in Volume 2 some more backstory, like a sort of inside joke. One of the things I love about this scene is Yang. She's just kind of talking mad shit about Weiss in the background, with Blake reprimanding her. After the sharing of the information, Xion gives them until her aura recovers to decide who's going back into her mind. A small detail that I love is the way they show Xion's aura recovering. It's an hourglass that has these flowers floating in it. It's just a cool connection. They decide that they all want to go in and help Weiss. RWBY is initially opposed to that, not wanting them to see this Weiss. I assume this is because RWBY is unsure of how they will take this Weiss. After all, the relationship between Weiss and Yang and Blake is a bit more contentious than her with RWBY. She's probably afraid that they might hate Weiss based on the other Weiss. At least that is my assumption. Blake's response is the one that was most interesting though. She says that she's been thinking about her relationship with Weiss, and she's come to realize that she also does not care. I'm assuming she means that she doesn't care that Weiss is a Schnee. This is actually a really cool addition to the friendship of the two. It's something that I never really thought about. Like, yeah, we get a scene that shows that Weiss has gotten over her distrust of Blake over the fact that she is a Faunus, realizing she doesn't really care about that stuff, but we never really get a confirmation scene like this that shows that Blake gets over the fact that she hates Weiss because she's a Schnee. This is Blake declaring that she doesn't care that Weiss is a Schnee, that her family, mostly her father, have done terrible things to her people. With that decided, they all get set into Weiss's dream world. And we finally get to see the other version of Blake and Yang. Blake's design was an interesting one when it was first shown. Everybody was like, oh yeah, it's a representation of how Weiss views the Faunus, which yeah, partly, but I think the clear thing it's supposed to represent is Weiss's conflicted views on Blake, compared to other Faunus. In this world, Blake is more human than other Faunus, only bearing some animal features. She's like this halfway point between a human and the way Weiss views the White Fang. I think this is because Weiss is caught between viewing Blake like a member of the White Fang and viewing her as just Blake. So she's caught in this weird halfway point. Yang's design is still a mystery to me. It just looks like Yang with a ponytail. She does have her motorcycle for some reason. I don't know how Weiss knew she rode one. Maybe she just assumed that Yang was just the kind of reckless person who would drive a motorcycle. Before they head out, RWBY shows the other two what happened to Crescent Rose, and Yang and Blake test their weapons out, just in case. Though theirs actually seem to be stronger in this world. I think this has to do with how Weiss views their combat capabilities. In comparison to RWBY, who is 2 years younger than her, Yang and Blake are the same age, and are a lot more competent in battle, more on her level in that regard. They also mention once again that if they use all of their coins, which they got 12 of this time, that they will be stuck in Weiss's dream world, which again has me convinced that by the end of this arc, that's going to happen. And they are going to have to take out this Grimm without Xion's help to guide them. Riding on their snowboard and motorcycle respectively, they reach the spot RWBY started at in the last episode, where we once again see Weiss's very confusing side. Yang has the same reaction RWBY had, about how it's very Weiss, so you know, like sister like sister. Then we once again see the train robbery from the last episode. Though this time with Blake there, she comments that it's the White Fang. Making their way to the marker that RWBY left last time, they enter the fortress through the door. The show then shifts over to Weiss, in a scene very reminiscent of the last episode where Klein reports of a train robbery by the White Fang, and mentions the girl in the black garbs, and how he's happy there are no Faunus in the Empire, though this time Weiss asks about Yang and RWBY's whereabouts. This scene implies there is some kind of time loop cycle to this world, where certain things happen every day at certain times, based on what is probably going on in Weiss's head. This scene ends with a coffin covered in ice coming out of the wall. In the center of this coffin is an apple, another nod to Snow White. Inside the apple is a white rook, which is the chess piece that they took in the fortress in the beginning of the show. This coffin is likely a representation of Weiss's heart, a heart that has been encased in ice to protect it from the outside world, to protect it from being harmed by the people and the emotions that they bring. It's a coffin, so it could also have the real Weiss in it, who they will need to free to help fight negative Weiss. Back to the others once again, and they are trying to find a way into the inner part of Weiss's fortress, when Blake sees the shadow people walking through a frozen fountain. RWBY though winds up at another silly jail, where we finally see Dream Pyrrha, who is a singer for the city. Then we get a beautiful rendition of Mirror Mirror by Pyrrha. This is a pretty significant scene, I believe. It shows us that Weiss sees Pyrrha as a sort of mirror of herself, someone she believes can relate to the loneliness associated with being famous, with the loneliness that comes with the pursuit of perfection. And while Weiss would not know this at this point, it's also a perfect representation of how Pyrrha feels about her status, and the way that people treat her. Despite probably having friends, they were likely fake ones. There because of her status, something that Weiss can relate to. A phone call from Yang drags RWBY back to the others, where they devise a plan to get through the fountain and into the inner fortress. At first, RWBY goes to use a coin to summon a decoy to distract the robots in front of it, though Yang stops her. Then Blake says she can provide the distraction, so she uses her semblance and speed to pull away the guards while Yang and RWBY go through the fountain, before joining them. I love this scene as it shows how much better Team RWBY operates as a team. While RWBY was alone, she blew through all her coins to get things done, but now that she has most of her team, they've avoided using coins, really only using one. This scene also shows us RWBY's lack of experience as a leader. Instead of trying to use her teammates' skills to their advantage, she just goes to do it on her own, which given RWBY's social ineptitudes, it makes sense that she would try to do everything by herself. Hopefully Ice Queendom will also show RWBY's growth into the leader she becomes in Volume 2. On the other side of the fountain, Yang uses that first coin to summon a marker. We get another scene shift to Weiss, where the coffin makes its way next to Weiss, where Klein says that it is a beautiful resting place that only true Schnee daughters can enter, while we see Vine slowly encroaching on Weiss over her chair. I think this is the Grimm trying to lure Weiss even deeper into her mind, so that it can entrench itself even deeper in her psyche, and it's using the voice of somebody that Weiss trusts implicitly to do so, someone Weiss would have no mixed feelings on. Before that could happen, Whitley bursts into the room to warn her about something, probably Yang and RWBY not being in their rooms, where Weiss proclaims once again she will do anything to prove herself worthy of the Schnee name. This show is really hammering at Weiss's insecurities and desire to live up to her name. We are then treated to the rest of Team RWBY looking up at a massive statue of Nicholas Schnee. Blake comments on how the sight of this statue is likely linked to how much of an effect he had on Weiss's life. Given how much that they are mentioning the grandfather, I do hope that we get some flashbacks with the grandfather and Weiss. I also hope we learn exactly what happened to him. All we know is that he was sick, which was mentioned in one of the World's Remnants, so I'm not sure if it matters. My running theory right now is that it has something to do with the White Fang, which is why Weiss has such a negative opinion on them. I love this because it proves one of my theories about her childhood that I did in another video right, where I talked about the effect of Weiss's grandfather on her. It's a video on the similarities between Weiss and Neo. If you are interested in watching it, I will link it in the description below. Then some sirens go off, telling the subjects of the Empire that Yang and RWBY have escaped from the Great Tower of Nicholas. With guards everywhere, RWBY decides maybe the best way to get to the center of Weiss's mind is by letting themselves get caught. So maybe RWBY is coming into her own as a leader starting now. They are escorted by Klein to their room in the tower, which is laid out exactly like their dorm room, bunk beds and all. It is revealed that this room is where Weiss keeps all of her most precious things, in which Yang and RWBY are part of. This shows despite the way she acts, she does care deeply for the sisters. Though honestly it is a bit surprising to see Yang amongst her collection of important things, as they barely talk. I guess they really bonded during those long hours searching for Blake. I do hope we get to see some actual moments between Weiss and her other two teammates in this dream world, as they don't happen enough. Her feelings on Blake are a bit more complicated, but she is still at the forefront of our mind, with her being mentioned in most of all of Weiss's scenes. Yang also talks some more shit before they enter the room, saying how maybe Weiss isn't all okay in the head, which is great as it adds a bit more levity to a more serious RWBY show. On her bunk bed, RWBY finds a red knight chess piece, surrounded by something that looks like the sign from before, a signifier of Weiss's conflicting feelings on RWBY. They call Xion to ask about this. When they call Xion though, she is taking a nap on a hammock, which is a great little scene. They are conserving their energy so they can help. Also, they are probably just really bored just sitting there. Shion tells them that this relic is likely a symbol of Weiss's rebellion to the Grimm, and the key to Weiss's mind. White Rose fans exploded when they saw this. Before I even watched this episode, I saw that White Rose was trending on Twitter. They cried that this is definitive proof that Weiss is in love with RWBY. Personally, I don't know about that, but it goes once again to show how much RWBY's friendship means to Weiss. That friendship will be the key to them saving Weiss. Though personally, I would love to see Weiss take some more proactive moves to help save herself. I'm not really a fan of turning Weiss into a purely helpless maiden to be saved. You know, it would be funny though if they found relics for each of the members of Team RWBY. After all, there are 4 knights on a chessboard. Which honestly I think I would prefer, as it would show that Weiss cares about each member of her teammates and would put a bigger emphasis on them as a team, which I feel has been missing from the show, as they tend to focus on individual partners rather than the team as a whole. RWBY goes to use a coin to summon Blake, but Blake picks the lock on the door before she can. Then she gets embarrassed about the fact that she can pick locks, which was actually pretty adorable. I do like that we get to see some of the skills that Blake picks up as a member of the White Fang in use. As they are leaving, they decide that one of them should stay behind to make sure that Sleepy Klein doesn't suspect anything is off, and it actually works. I'm seriously wondering if making Sleepy Klein the door to the room that holds RWBY and Yang was a subconscious way that Weiss was trying to help them, as she would be aware of which one of Klein's personalities would be the least reliable, and that one was put on the door that would keep Yang and RWBY locked up. RWBY and Yang play a game of rock paper scissors to see who goes with Blake, which Yang loses, which is both disappointing and good. It unfortunately means that Yang is once again sidelined, which has happened a lot in the show, though it makes sense. I mean, as far as relationships go with Weiss, Yang is the least important, as they don't really talk much in the first 3 volumes, though it makes more sense to focus on the 2 characters that helped shape Weiss's character development, though this could have been a good chance to change that and give them some more scenes together. The reason that this was a good thing is that it means we're going to be getting more interaction between RWBY and Blake, which we also don't get very much of. After this, we get a scene where Blake and RWBY talk about the relic, where she mentions it's probably another one where Blake's other self was, and we get a small flash of an empty desk. I'm not sure what this is supposed to mean. It could be a flash of where Blake started, and the fact that there was nothing there, signifying that this, outside of Weiss's, is the only other one, further pushing the narrative that RWBY will be the sole key to saving Weiss, which would be a bit weird since they've only known each other for like a week. Something like this would make more sense later in the series. As they explore this really creepy room, like seriously what is up with this room? It feels like a room out of a horror game. All it's missing is dead bodies in the many chairs in the room. Walking along, they run into Weiss, who is with Grumpy Klein, Whitley, Dog Klein I think, and her army. The episode ends right before they square off, with Weiss saying faunas don't belong in our empire, which is likely the Grimm trying to drive Blake from attempting to save her. Episode 5 did a good job showcasing the abilities of the other members of Team RWBY, with Blake playing a huge role in the success of the plan to sneak into Weiss's mind. Let's hope that Yang gets a chance to shine as well. Speaking of Yang though, despite her not being that important, I loved her in this episode. Her snarky comments about Weiss helped add a bit of levity to this more depressing RWBY anime. They also did a really good job of showing off how much more efficient the characters are when working as a team, but also showcasing that they aren't completely cohesive yet, with RWBY still trying to do things on her own. The cover of Mirror Mirror was beautiful, and was done perfectly. Having the one character that would be able to understand Weiss's loneliness singing it was perfection. They also did a great job of laying the groundwork for how they will wind up saving Weiss, with the introduction of the relic. And we got more mentions of Nicholas Schnee, so we had better get more information on him. If not, I will be very disappointed, and all the build-up they've been doing would have been for nothing. This was a slower episode overall, but I didn't mind that, as they had plenty of interesting interactions to keep me engaged. With that said, I think I'd give this episode a 7.5, another pretty solid episode, but I don't think it was as good as some of the previous ones. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and once again, thanks for watching. Weegee out.